So one of the things that is difficult to do with the Dianthus is pinching, and you look at the image on the upper right. That is sort of the evolution of the flower bud forming on a shoot. When it's a vegetative shoot, it's very difficult to get to the meristem without removing a bunch of foliage. You can see we've taken the foliage off in these pictures, but the idea is when that flower bud forms, it's much easier to pinch, but that doesn't always happen consistently. And if you try to do a hard pinch, as you can see in this picture, you end up with a pretty hacked cutting. So Nathan, tell us what we can do here.
Yeah, so this picture is what we did with hard pinch. We took a shear, and as you said, we removed a lot of the leaf material. And I think there is a little bit of delay there even if you do that. So that soft pinch worked pretty well. You can see it, the plants in the center around that orange circle, they are branching quite readily, even with just a removal of that disc budding. But you have to get down into the canopy if you want to cut that meristem in order to induce branching. So it's a pretty low pinch. So if you go to the next slide, is a perfect example there of, well, we missed it. And we keep bringing up the cell size, and we went to a larger cell size in this case for this trial. And see, my grower were just cut right at the plastic level. Well, some of those plants had sunk down a little bit further, and so the meristem was a little bit lower. And as you can see, we missed the pinch on some of the liners there. So if you're doing manual and mechanical pinching, you might be introducing some variability into your crop later on. So you need to ensure that you get some pinches on it, use GA or trial it out like James was indicating, or look at configure, which I think is the next set of the slides. So we worked on a no pinch regime and comparing that to pinching on a number of different varieties you can see on the bottom of the screen there. And why we're doing this, right? Pinching is labor intensive, it's time intensive, we have potential misses, and there's also potential there to transfer disease. Anytime we're cutting and transferring sap between plants, we can transfer bacteria and viruses. So the question here was really, is there a benefit to chemical pinching? And I know a lot of people are talking about configure right now, trying it out, and they want to see, are there benefits on it? So this trial here, we sprayed configure at 3 different rates and then compared that to a soft and a hard pinch. You'll see right here on this graph, we're just comparing the control, the hard pinch, and configure at 600 parts per million. And what we did, instead of counting all those branches, because that can be quite tedious, initially we just grouped the liners on a subjective rating, whether it was high branching, medium, low, or the plant was dead. And so when we look at this graph and the number of liners that fell into those categories, we've got Deer here, and you can look back on the specific variety earlier up. That one didn't show much of a benefit, but then Early Love, we had a pretty good increase in the number of liners that had a high branching. And what we're looking here is uniformity of branching. We don't just want a few liners to have a lot of branching, we want all the liners to have a lot of branching. And so as you go to the next slide, Gary, we can see that Everlast as well, we increased the number of liners that had a high amount of branching. And then the next slide as well, with Pink Kisses, this one didn't respond as well, but it did have more liners that had that higher uniformity of highly branched characteristics. Next slide. So if you're wondering, does this apply to every variety in the assortment? Well, we haven't tested them all, but this is across, I think, 8 different varieties. And you can see that you do get branching without pinching. You get a little bit more with soft pinch or even a hard pinch. But then as you increase in the rate of configure all the way up to 600 parts, in general, you'll see an increase in the branching for every liner. Varieties did vary significantly, whether they had a positive response or no response, but we never saw a negative response. And then we'll just quickly go through these next few slides here, just showing some pictures. On the right, no pinch, no configure, and then we increase from 2, 4, and 6 as we go to the left. And you see there is a good amount of branching on the no pinch, but really at that 400 mark where it's super visible that we have a good amount of branching on these liners. And then the next slide as well, pink kisses, a good amount of branching, no pinch, but we do see an increase as well when we increase to that 400 to 600 parts per million.
Do you think, Nathan, that perhaps using like repeat applications, coming in, like you said, you did it, going in earlier in the prop stage, and then perhaps at the end of the liner cycle or shortly after transplanting would continue to enhance the branching? Do you think that's logical?
Yeah, so this is 2 weeks. It was applied 2 weeks after stick in a 128. And repeated could definitely be beneficial, and we'll see some later application pictures in some next up slides. But yeah, it could be beneficial. I'm just not sure if you're going to get that product all to the nodes that need it, but it's worth giving a shot. And there's the I love you, and that 600 is really, in comparison to the no pinch, we're getting some great branching on that product.
It's impressive.
So early love, again, you can see this in that larger cell compared to a 128, and no pinch hard, and then 600 at the bottom. What we found when we counted the branches was we really didn't increase the number from the base, but this one we applied at a later stage. And so the plants look much more full. And as you'll see on the next slide here, is that later application of Configure 3 weeks after stick, we hit the lateral branches with Configure, which induced lateral branches on those laterals. So that's why those plants look so much more full, and that's why we're going to get an even more full plant at finish.
Gee whiz, I can think of about 10 other species we should be playing with here too, for sure.
Lateral squared.
Yeah, that's nice when you see that, because again, when we talk about one of the challenges when you're going into this fall for an early spring sale is to be able to bulk that plant early enough, and getting those branches and then letting those branches fill out will fill the pot and then also increase your flower count. But filling the pot has been one of the challenges, especially, trying to hit those early February dates.
And I think you really have to combine it with the feed, because that's something we didn't do in this picture. Is these were a little bit hungry, and so we didn't quite get the stretch and the filling out that we wanted to. But when you compare the 600 to the no pinch, you can see just the density of shoots is way higher with 600 parts per million. So if you combine it with the right feed and the right temperature, you're really going to get a really nice bushy floriferous crop.